In this video, we are going to configure storage spaces on Windows Server 2016. So if you follow my Windows Server 2016 series, then you know that in the last video that I posted, we talked about what storage spaces is, what are the new features in Windows Server 2016, and how it works. In this video, we are going to use a virtual machine to demonstrate how to configure storage spaces using PowerShell. So the first thing I have to do, and if you follow along you have to do also, is to prepare the virtual machine. I already have a virtual machine installed and I want to assign it a couple of disks. We are going to use PowerShell, of course, for this. I'm logged on my Hyper-V host, and check it out. I want to add 4 disks that occupy 20 gigabytes, which will be considered the SSDs of the virtual machine, and another 16 disks that will be considered hard disks and are 40 gigabytes. So now let's create the disks. I had to change my drive letter because my Hyper-V files are on drive E. So first we create the 4 disks that should represent the SSDs. Let's create also the disks that will represent the hard disks. And we take all these disks and assign them to WDS01, which will be my server for this video. And it should be done. Let's see in Hyper-V Manager if it really did the trick. So in WDS01 we see that we have a couple of disks, so everything seems to be okay. Now this is it for the host. The next part will be on the virtual machine directly. Okay, so this is WDS01, and the first command I want to show you is a way that you can see all the physical disks that you have, which can be included in a storage pool. Here are all the disks that we can use, and you see there is also an 80 gigabyte disk here. This will not be used. This is a disk that I used for another video, which is this one. So we will exclude this when we create our pool. Let's also see a list of all the storage pools that we have on this server. And for now, we only have a storage pool called Primordial. And you don't have to worry about this. This is created automatically by Windows. And it exists only when you have disks that are not assigned to a storage pool. As soon as all the disks disappear, Primordial will not be visible anymore because it's not needed. This only exists to create the illusion that everything in Windows Server is based on storage spaces. So all the disks that are not assigned to normal pools should be in a storage pool. So with the next command, let's create a storage pool. And the storage pool that I want to create will contain first only 10 hard disks out of all of the hard disks that we can pull. So run the command, and the storage pool is now created. And of course, now if we run this command to show the physical disks that can be added to a pool, there are less because we depleted 10 of them already. Now if we want to add the remaining disks, we can use add physical disk. We just specify the storage pool name where we want to add them. We specify the disks themselves. We get all the disks that can be pulled. Sort by size. Select the first 10 because I don't want the one that is 80. And with this command we are going to do something interesting. We are going to set these disks to be hot spares. So this is the way you would set a disk to be a hot spare in a storage pool. So we are done also with this. Next, I don't want to use hot spares. I don't need them. So let's get all the physical disks that are hot spares, and let me run first only this command. And here they are. And let's set them to auto select. And here's a way to get all the physical disks that are part of a specific storage pool. There you go. These are all the disks in our pool. And now we should remain with only one disk that could be pulled if we wanted to. Now, if we want to use storage tiers that we discussed a little about in the last video, in our virtual machine we have to do a couple of tweaking. Normally on a hardware server, when you connect SSDs or HDDs, they will be recognized as they are, so the server will know what those are. In our case, since this is a virtual machine with virtual disks, it will not know what media type our disks are. So let me show you. You see, the media type for all our disks in the pool is unspecified. But we will fix it right now. And as a disclaimer, so don't do this, or you should not do this on a production server, because normally the disks should be automatically categorized correctly by the server. You should only do this if you know what you're doing, or if you are testing like I am doing now. So let's get all the disks in storage pool 1, sort by size, select only the first 4. We set them as SSDs. And the other ones we will set as HDDs. And if we now get a list, you can see that everything has been done. So we have 4 SSDs and the rest are HDDs. So now we can continue to configure our storage tiers. And in this video we are going to make 2 storage tiers. We are going to call one the fast tier, which will contain the SSDs, of course, and the other one will be called the slow tier, which will contain the hard disks. So this is the command that we are going to use. Storage pool 1 is the storage pool of choice, and we have fast and slow with media type SSD and HDD. This is how easy it is. Let's create the fast one, let's create the slow one, and we can get a list of our storage tiers. You see, fast and slow. And once you have storage tiers created, with this command you can do something very interesting. You can get the size that is supported for a specific resiliency type. For example, I want to know only on the slow tier what is the maximum size that I could get if I want to make a simple volume. I just run this command, and this would be the maximum size in bytes, and this would be the minimum size of a disk in bytes. And the same can be done also for the fast tier and other resiliency settings. And before we continue, we have to make one setting that is very important if you want that when a hard disk fails, the storage pool to be automatically repaired. This command will make it so when a disk is missing from your storage pool for some reason, it will automatically be set as retired, meaning that then the storage spaces system can start to reconstruct the data that was on that disk. If the disk will not be set as retired, the reconstruction will not happen automatically. So this command is very important. That's why we will run it. And unfortunately, the server has to be restarted before we continue for this setting to take effect. So I will restart it and come back when it's up again and we can continue. Okay, so we are back in business. Now we have the tiers created. We have also this setting applied. Let's start and create virtual disks so we see how this works. With the first command, I will create a virtual disk that is called virtual disk 1, will be of size 2 gigabytes, will be thin provisioned, so it will not actually occupy 2 gigabytes physically. And I want it to be parity with 2 parity disks, so dual parity. If we run the command, the disk should be created. And let's also create a volume on that disk so we can actually use it. And you see it would normally prompt us to format it, but it's already done, so we cancel. To create a simple thin provisioned disk, it's basically the same thing, but the resiliency setting name will be simple. So just create it. And the same, let's format it so it has a volume. And I just want to make one more disk, so I also show you how to configure disks that will use storage tiering, because until now we did not configure these two disks to use storage tiers. So in order to do this, we need to get a reference to the two tiers, so the fast tier and the slow tier. And now when we create the disk, I wanted this one to be a mirror disk, three-way mirror. I wanted to use these two storage tiers, and I wanted to have 2 gigabytes in the fast tier and 4 in the slow tier. This is the way you do it. So the order that you put the tiers in here will also match the sizes, the order of the sizes in the second parameter. So be very careful with this. Okay, this created. Let's also format this one so we can place files on it. Now, if we go to Explorer, you see all of our disks. The last one is the disk that also uses tiering. Let's just create a test file on it. The simplest file ever, test.txt. So you see everything is okay. Let me also show you from the server manager how everything we did looks until now. So I will refresh, and if we go to file and storage services, you can see in volumes all of our volumes that exist on the server normally. And I noticed something interesting in provisioning. The last disk we made, it should be fixed, but it says here unknown. I'm not sure why this happens. My feeling is that this is because this Windows server has not been updated, and maybe there's a bug in storage spaces when you install Windows from the DVD directly. But so the space is occupied, but unfortunately instead of fixed, here we have unknown. Let's go to disks. So we have the 3 virtual disks that we just created, and in storage pools we have our storage pool. You can see, for example, the full capacity and the free space of the storage pool. We can also see all the disks that are part of the storage pool. We can also see the 3 virtual disks, and you see here in layout it doesn't say anything, although it's mirror, we know that it's mirror, and in provisioning it says unknown, but it's fixed. So I haven't figured out why this would happen. I still think it's because this server is not updated. And from the graphical interface, if you wanted to, you could create a virtual disk like this from tasks. It's very simple. I prefer to use Powershell, but everything we did, of course, can be done also from this interface from Server Manager. Let's jump back. Okay, so we just created a file, like I said. And if, for example, I want this file to be in the fast tier, I don't want it to be moved around as I use it, I can use this very cool command to specify the file name and specify that I want it to be part of the fast tier of virtual disk free. And now we can't test it, but believe me, now this file is pinned to the fast tier. Of course, this is only a metadata setting. The file will be moved once the scheduled task that moves files around will run. Since we don't want to wait for it to run, we can run it ourselves. Let's get a list of scheduled tasks that are used for storage tiering. And these are the two scheduled tasks. Management, initialization, and optimization. The optimization one is the one that we want, so the one that will move files around. And we can run it very simply, like this. So after this task runs, then you can consider that your file has been optimized, meaning that it has been placed in the correct tier that it should be placed in. With this command, you can get a list of all your virtual disks. And again, you see, instead of mirror, we get nothing here, but doesn't matter. Let's now see what happens if, for example, we would remove a disk from our storage, so the storage pool would remain with a disk missing. Let's, for example, remove disk number 6, remove, apply. So this disk is gone. Let's hit OK. And if I now go back to my virtual machine, let's get a list of all our virtual disks. And what's happening here? The simple disk is okay, meaning that it has been created on other disks from our storage pool, so removing that disk did not affect it. The parity disk is incomplete, and the mirror disk is degraded and incomplete, so this one is in a very bad shape. Let's see if they still work. So the first disk should be the parity disk, so disk 1. This one should still work, although it is degraded. And you see that we can still write to it, it's okay. The second disk is the one that is really okay, nothing has happened to it, so this one should still work. And the third disk, although a disk is missing, you see that it's still working. So we can modify it, write to it, and so on. So all disks are working, even though a physical disk is missing. Let's get again a list. You see that the third disk already has been repaired. The first disk will also be repaired at some point, because storage spaces waits for I/O to happen on the disk for it to repair it, and then it will start. So it's no problem. We can check later, for example, and it for sure will be repaired. In Server Manager, if we refresh, we can also see here that these disks either are okay or not, judging by this warning sign. And in the list of physical disks, we also have a retired disk. Like I told you, the storage spaces system will retire the disk automatically, so the others can be then repaired. Now let's move on. So we will continue in this scenario. Let's remove the old disk and add a new disk. So first I will add a new disk to the virtual machine. We go to settings, to the controller. Let's add a new virtual disk to WDS01. So disk added. Now with a new disk inserted, let's first add it to the storage pool. And we have to set its media type to HDD, you know. So set it to HDD. And to fully clean up everything we did, now let's also remove the old disk. This command will not be needed in our case. So if we had, for example, the simple volume, which cannot be repaired, which was in an inconsistent state, we would first need to remove this one in order to add the new disk. But in this case, we don't need to do anything. So we can just move on to removing our retired disk. And now everything should be back really to normal. So if I refresh here, you would see now that the retired disk is gone and everything looks normal again. And with this, this was all for storage spaces. I wanted to go through all of the basic PowerShell commands so you can see how to automate different tasks. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it is useful for you. Please like the video if it is. Also consider sharing it and subscribing to the channel. And thanks a lot for watching.